In this episode of MQ How To, I'm going to talk to you about the hit chart. This is one of the most popular items that I have in my shop. It's something that I talk with coaches on a regular basis. It's something that I feel like over the years has really proved its worth. And I want to go through kind of the different parts of it, why you need to have something like this. Now, if you use Hudl and their hit chart and things like that, that's great. I just like this because there's a couple things that you could do with this. And two, I think that I've whittled it down to being very specific. And then aesthetically, you can make it look pretty nice too. So first thing up here that you're going to notice is the personnel. So now what I do with these is what I like to do is I sort everything by most to least. So what is the first personnel that you're going to have? The nice thing about this too is that the first time you do this, you can start making templates. And so, you know, you can make a new one down here, and then you can start changing these and start making these into different formations. So that way you have like the base formation. So for instance, you have a 2x2, and then you can easily create a 3x1 easily out of this one. And that way you can keep these forever. And so then you can come in here, and that's how you get you started. So that's an easy way of doing that. Now, what I do up here is the personnel. It's the first thing that I put in. And so let's just say this for instance, is 10 personnel. Now, if it was 11 personnel, and most of the time people put a tight end right here. Now, I leave these blank for you guys because some people like to use a number system. Other people like to use a letter. I'm a letter guy, so I always have Z and Y together. And then S for strong slot or slot. And then X travel together. I always call it running back A. And then the Q is obviously Q. Now, if you want to take it a next step further, is you can always change these into different colors. I usually always put the running back. You put the running back as red. Now, what I do is if I'm going to color it, I'm going to make it also bold too, so it stands out. The nice thing that I like about too is that if you do this, you can keep track of like where the tight end and the running back are in different formations. So, for instance, if this is actually an 11 personnel formation, I can always keep track of that. And then I always like to put the wide receivers as green, or just leave them as white for that. So that's kind of an easy way to set those up. And then I usually keep the quarterback white, but if you want to get fancy with it and you want to make them a color, I usually make them black. So that's kind of how I do it. And then you can move these guys around. This is a formation name. So for instance, this would be gun near Twix because he's on the line. Twin. If the both were off the line, okay, right here, then I would just call that gun near doubles. All right, gun near doubles. And then this is how many times they ran it. So you have up to 100. So if you are breaking down 10 games for a playoff game and they really love doubles and you get 100 of them, you got enough in there. Now, another thing that you can do with these that I really like to do is if they, for instance, 11 personnel in my view, I always label it as green. And so you can make that aesthetically nice, look nice there too. It's like, okay, so if you print these all out, and because this prints on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So if you print these out and you have access to a colored printer, now what you can do is you can line them up on a big wall and you can easily identify them just off a color. So I kind of like doing that. Now what I've done up at the top is, what's a shift? First of all, a shift is any time, let's say Y moves inside and he sits down, okay? And that's where he stops. Well, this formation now would be gun far stack, twin open. It'd still be 11 personnel, but that shift, if he always, I would put, it would be, since it would start out as gun near double and move here, that I would label that as too strong, in, and how many times they did that. So let's say they do this. Let's say we've got 20 clips of this, and let's say this is a big motion of theirs, and they did it 7 times. Okay, and so what you can do is, let's say that most of the time that we get this, all right, let's say a majority of the time, let's say they do this 11 times, what you can do is duplicate that by Command D, and what I'll do is I'll come over here and I'll put that here. And what I like to do here is, and if you go down to format shape, you can actually turn the transparency down, right? So I'll turn it to like 70, Okay, and what I'll do inside that is I'll actually make it gray. And then the outline over here, I'll make gray as well. And so now it looks like a ghost, right? And so what you can do off of that is come up to the shapes and just get a line. And so you can draw this up. So every time that you're looking at that and you're like, oh, well, a majority of the time, this is what they're doing. I usually put motions as green and then shifts as purple. So I'll put a purple dash right there, and I usually put a dash line right there. So now I know every time that I see this hit chart 20 times, over 50% of the time, if I see Y's out here, I need to move in. So what I need to do then, and what that tells me is how many times do they actually line up in, you know, gun near doubles with Y at the 2 strong. Because if they're doing that, you know, that's also a lot of times that gives you a clue on what they're doing. So that's kind of how I work that. This would also be FIB too, like if they put this in a majority of the time, so they get an FIB. Now, formation into the boundary, what you need to do with that is how many times is the formation into the boundary. So what I like to do is I always put the formation strength to the defensive left or the offensive right. So remember, I'm not, if you're familiar with my breakdown process, I don't do right and left formations. I do the full formation, and then I use the kind of the right and left data within Hudl to determine, you know, are they right hand dominant or left hand dominant. So for instance, this actually would be a formation in the boundary. So if we had, let's say we get this this right here 20 times. And they are motioning him in 11, and every time they do that, that's because it's formation in the boundary. Well, this number matches this number. I'm like, oh, okay, now we know what we got. They're putting these guys into the boundary. So formation, sometimes, and other things I've labeled it FTB, or you can label it FIB. All that means is formation, trips, or back. Well, this would be formation, so you would just put that right there. Passes are always in red, runs are always in blue. Now with the run, what you can do is, let's say they run a split zone, okay? And they're running a bunch of, or let's say they run, this would probably be a better example. Let's say they're running some power, same side power this way. Okay, so what I'll put here is, I'll just label this as same side power. Okay, and so what I do here, make sure if you're flipping it on the other side, I always make sure to change where it goes. So I put same side, power, let me turn caps on, power, let's say they do this 5 times. Now, if they're running, let's say they run a couple of jet motions. So this would be, this is where I would put in, I put 2S jet, okay, and I would put, let's say they do it like 4 times, okay. So what I would put here is, let's say they run like a jet stretch and a double lead over here. So what I would do is, instead of putting it under there, I'd actually put it outside of the tackle box. And let's say they've run it, they only gave it to them twice. So I'm just gonna put jet stretch, okay, here twice, and so it would go under here. So they've done that right. Now, let's say they do counter the other way. Okay, well then you would put this over here, and let's say they've done counter GY. Now again, if you notice, I made that mistake. Make sure when you do this, you flip this over here so it shows up. So let's say they do counter GY, and let's say they did it 3 times. Okay, so now we've got 8, 10 runs. So down here it should match, where you should have 10 down here, and let's say they ran it 15 times out of this, and then they only passed it 5 times out of this. So I should only have 5 passes up here, and then I should have the 15 runs that match down here. Now what I like that I add in as well is the opponent and the number. So let's say you're looking at an opponent, and maybe they do something defensively where, man, okay, when they were playing, you know, American high school, and they did this is 20 times, man, they did this 10 times, but then when they played their second week opponent, which was Central High School, they only did it 3 times. And then after that, you know, let's say, okay, when they did that, so that gives us 13, and then you would make sure that these all match up with this. So what you notice is, man, this was a big part of the game plan here. But when you go down and they were playing, you know, West High School, they did it 3 times. And then they did it again. Since you're break, let's say they did it so the numbers match up right. You know, you get another team and they said North High School, they did it, what would that be, 4 times. And so you come down here and you're looking at this and you're like, wait a second, okay, why are they so much into, what were they doing against, you know, America's high school, you know, 10 times, why are they doing that? So I like to do that in this box right there, because what it does is too, is like, let's say maybe America High School is a 3 down, but these other 3 teams were 4 down. Well, then you could predict, hey, I'm a 3 down team. We need to make sure that we get this formation. All these others, kind of what are they doing? We need to go back and look and what are they attacking at it. Maybe there's something in there that we need to kind of look at. So that's kind of what I like right there in this box to do right there. So that kind of gives you a general vibe on how to do this. Now, one of the cool things that I like about this, if you want to do, let's go, give me a new slide that's blank. What you can do is you can actually make this a picture. You can do it 2 ways. You can group it, okay, and then right click and then put save as a picture. Okay, or you can use your Command Shift 4 if you're on a Mac, or your cut tool, and then you can drag and drop it that way. The easiest way to do this though is to do the save as a picture. So once you've got this saved, then you're just going to save it as a picture. Okay, so let me right click, save as a picture. I'm just going to save it as a desktop. I'm going to save it to my pictures. I'm going to save it for this one. I'm just going to save it as picture 1. It doesn't matter. Okay, so this should show up over here, and what you're going to do is you're going to drag and drop it in here, right? And so now what you've done is you can shrink these, okay, and you can line multiple ones up. So I'll duplicate them just so you can kind of get an idea. So what you could end up doing is you could end up having about 9 of these on a page or more, depending on what you end up doing with these. And so you can see how this would be nice to have in your hand as you're looking, like through game plan, or let's say you're in your room or you're not in the office and you don't have your big hit chart board. You can carry this around. Most high school teams aren't having a bunch of formations anyway. Now you're not going to have like 100 of these. You may have at the most maybe 30. Well, if I can fit 9 on here, that's a pretty good amount on there. I'm looking at 3 pieces of paper if I do front and back. So I like to do that. That's kind of the next step in the process of using this hit chart. This has helped me tremendously over the years. Really gives you a visual cue on what they're doing and where they're going, what motions they're using. What I like to do too is if there's a big trend, I'll put an alert on here and you'll kind of create my own box and make an alert on here and kind of show that through there. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to work that hit chart. I know that's a question that I get is that, yeah, this is kind of self-explanatory. You fill these out, but then how do I use these? How do I look at it? What are some different things that I can add to it? If you're interested in this, again, this is at the MatchQuarters shop. I'll make sure to have a link in the explanation below. If you're interested in opponent breakdown, again, I have a book called Breaking Down Your Offensive Opponent. I'll have a link in the explanation as well for that too. That's really built and explains this kind of in a written format for you as well. But it's always nice to get that visual from somebody that does it. So again, thank you for joining me today. Make sure to check out the book. Make sure to check out the templates at MatchQuarters.com. And always make sure to subscribe to MatchQuarters for more clinics like this. Come learn the art of X.